Welcome, everyone. I'm going to wait a couple minutes. I'm watching the participants come in. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and new names. We're so excited to have you here. Yes, it keeps growing. Wonderful. So wonderful to have a strong response. We're excited to share with you about our collections. We'll wait till the numbers slow down a little bit. It's kind of like hitting the jackpot at Vegas, where it's like, ba-bing, ba-bing. All these people keep entering. Wonderful. And it's kind of like romper room. Like, hi, David Stein. Hi, Erica Perez. Hi, Romeo. Hello, everyone. Great. Okay. I know that some of you are here on your lunch hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Natalia Molina. I am the interim research director here at the Huntington Library. I am also a distinguished professor of American Studies and Ethnicity at USC, and I'm the author of most recently A Place at the Nayeli. Today, we're very excited to bring to you our Zoom webinar on What Does the Huntington Have for Me? A conversation with our Huntington curators, Dr. Clay Stalls and Dr. Peter Blodgett, and one of our former long-term fellows, Dr. Verónica Castillo-Muñoz. The conversation today will revolve around the library's extensive Hispanic collections of manuscript collections, rare books, and other printed materials, maps, and photographs that range geographically from Mexico to the US Southwest and California, chronologically from the 16th century to the 20th century. So scholars interested in borderlands and transnational history should find these presentations especially valuable. Each of our curators will present for about 10 minutes, and then Dr. Castillo-Muñoz will present for about 5 minutes. And then we will reserve the last half hour of the webinar for your questions. We want you to be able to be as informed about our collections as possible, especially if you're thinking of visiting the Huntington Library. So first I will introduce Dr. Clay Stahl, who stewards the Huntington's 20th century California materials, as well as its Hispanic collections dating from the 15th century to the present. He has published in California history as well as medieval Iberian history. Next, Dr. Peter Blodgett has overseen the library's collections related to the history of the North American West from 1800 to the present since joining the Huntington in 1985. Dr. Blodgett has spoken and published widely on national parks, tourism, and recreation, as well as the management of manuscript and archives. And I just want to add a note that one thing I don't think I quite realized, even though I've been coming to the Huntington since I was a graduate student, is that I know that you're supposed to meet with the curators because they can tell you things that maybe aren't on the library finding guides, or they can contextualize it, but they really are the Huntington's faculty. And so just like you always want your students to come to office hours, even though you're in class and you're showing them your syllabus, they're kind of, the meeting with the curator is kind of like office hours. Yes, you have the information in lots of ways, but it's just very different to meet with the curator. That might be an email, it might be an introduction, it might be asking if they can meet while you're here, whatever it is. But please, if you're at the Huntington, if you're thinking of coming, always consult with us. We are happy to do that. You just get this different range of expertise. The other reason that we're hosting the webinar now is because both Dr. Blodgett and Dr. Stahl will be at the Western History Association meeting next week in San Antonio. So if you see them, at the very least, stop and say hi. Tell them you might be coming to the Huntington, or that you enjoyed their webinar, or ask a follow-up question. But we really want this to be a space where we introduce you to them, but also introduce you to the collections, but also introduce you to them and kind of demystify the Huntington. Next, we also have Dr. Verónica Castillo-Muñoz, who is an associate professor in the Department of History at UC Santa Barbara. She's an interdisciplinary scholar with training in gender history, Latin America, and U.S. history. She has written widely on the intersections between gender, family, migration, and the U.S. borderlands. We've had many wonderful scholars here working on the American Southwest and borderlands, but I particularly wanted Dr. Castillo-Muñoz to present because I was in a presentation that she did before, and all we kept hearing was, we never knew that Huntington had materials in these areas, and that Dr. Castillo-Muñoz particularly brings them to life. So we are honored to have the three of them here today. Thank you. I will now turn it over to, and I forget, we've gone over this twice. Is it Peter or Clay first? Yes.
Sure.
Okay. We'll now it'll be very formal. We'll now turn it over to Dr. Sauls. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to today's program. Thank you for being here. And also I need to thank Dr. Molina, Natalia Stern, and Wes Hardesty for all their hard work in putting together today's program. At any rate, in my 10 minutes of fame today, I'm not going to attempt the foolhardy task of trying to cover literally hundreds of collections in Hispanic history here at the Huntington Library. Rather, what I'm going to try to do is provide points of entry or points of access or an understanding of what our research strengths here are at the Huntington Library. And I'll be doing that by listing our research strengths on the screen here, as you see here. Also, I'll be covering specifically California and Mexico, and I'll do so with the understanding of, with the historiographical position that the history of California, Hispanic history, and of course the history of Mexico are intimately intertwined. So now let's begin with California, 20th century California. You can see some of the research strengths up here on the screen, and I'm going to emphasize two: politics and the history of immigration. And I could do so by highlighting such collections as those of Gloria Molina or the Lozano family and their all-important La Opinion newspaper, but I'm not. Rather, I'm going to emphasize collections that offer sources, primary sources that usually are not found in manuscript repositories or library special collections, or sources that highlight different aspects, for example, of politics, Hispanic politics. So let's begin first with that great theme of North American history, immigration. And I bring to your attention the Chavez Esparza family letters, a collection of a little over 300 letters written in the 1960s, principally in the 1960s and 1970s, by members of the Chavez Esparza family who made the move from the town of Calvillo in the state of Aguascalientes in Mexico to the United States, including California. The importance of these letters written by such persons as Rogelio Martinez Serna should be obvious, for they are firsthand documentation of the migrant experience, written by persons themselves who made the move. They document such aspects of their lives as work, experiences with government, and a very important theme in current literature on the topic, the gains and losses of the migrant experience. I should point out that these letters came to us from Dr. Miroslava Chavez Garcia of the University of California at Santa Barbara. These are her family's letters and the basis for her award-winning book, Migrant Longing. Now let's turn to politics, specifically the Pedro Villaseñor papers. Pedro Villaseñor came to Los Angeles from the state of Michoacan in 1926. He died here in 1991. Pedro Villaseñor was an ardent supporter and organizer of the Crucero and Sinarquista cause here in Los Angeles. Of course, you know that the Cruceros and Sinarquistas were a major political / religious, even military movement in Mexico in the late 20s, 1930s into the 1940s that resisted the extreme enforcement of the anti-clerical provisions of the Constitution of 1917 by the Mexican federal government. At any rate, this collection certainly has transnational history implications, as did the collection previously that I brought up, the Chavez Esparza family letters. For example, Villaseñor edited and helped produce a newspaper / newsletter in 1935 that had not only circulation in Los Angeles, but also circulation throughout the United States. in Chicago, Louisiana, and also internationally. This newspaper that supported the Cristero cause is distributed in Mexico and also such places, such countries as Cuba and Peru. Also, there's information in this collection on Cristero organizing in Chicago, a really unusual collection. I should point out that Dr. Julia Young of Catholic U has used this collection in her research on Sinarquistas, and also that this collection has formed the basis or has been the basis for an article on the transnational aspects of Mexican Roman Catholic identity. Now let's turn to the 19th century, and the clear point of interest for access, in my view, to our holdings in 19th century Hispanic history is our California families. That is families who had their origin in California before 1848 and were primarily Spanish speaking. I'm only going to highlight one. These are the papers, the records of Jose Matias Moreno and his wife, Fulgencio Lopez de Moreno. And here we have one example, also transnational history here, a letter to Moreno in 1861. He died in 1867. He was also an important official in Baja California, that property both in Baja and also San Diego. And it notes the Chinese who were leaving Santo Tomas in Baja California, presumably for the San Diego area. Also, it's true of all of our collections related to Californian families. Personages frequently and intensively are found in these various collections. Here, for example, in the Moreno papers, we have a number of different letters by the well-known 19th century Mexican-American author Maria Amparo Ruiz de Burton. There are a number of letters in this collection. In these letters, you can see her views on the Mexican War of Reform from 1857 to 1860, her relationships with indigenous persons on a rancho outside of San Diego. And also here, surprising to me at least, was the fact that she was an agent working for Hubert Howe Bancroft in the creation of his great Bancroft Library on Western American history, which of course is now at Berkeley. And I should also point out that we have the largest collections of letters by Maria Amparo Ruiz de Burton anywhere in the world. And I don't want to forget our photographs. Also, we literally have hundreds of photographs. I pulled out just two. And the one on my right is my favorite. I mean, you just don't see that these days in this age of electronic and digital media. Anyway, it's a wonderful photograph, just one example. So now I'm going to turn to Mexico, specifically colonial Mexico. My colleague Peter Blodgett will be discussing some collections after 1821 related to Mexican history. You can see some of the research topics here on the screen of fellows who've been at the Huntington Library, Afro-Mexican women in Veracruz, and one that I found particularly interesting, the relationship between indigenous persons and priests in the confessional. And such wide-ranging research topics are possible here at the Huntington because of the number of research strengths we have in our colonial Mexican holdings, which I think is perfectly exemplified, well exemplified by our most heavily used collection related to colonial Mexico, our Mexican Inquisition papers, which are court cases and other information, other records related to the work of the Supreme Tribunal of the Inquisition in New Spain, that is colonial Mexico. And because of they reflect the intensity and extensive and thorough nature of Spanish colonial bureaucratic record keeping. So at least through the lens of the Spanish ecclesiastical bureaucracy that produced them, you can one can investigate social and cultural practices, including folklore, the lives of women, ethnic history, and of course also the Spanish ecclesiastical bureaucracy that's responsible for for the Inquisition in Mexico. Also, we have one of the largest collections in the world, early Mexican imprints. And what I mean by early Mexican imprints are books printed in Mexico using movable metal type font face between 1540 to 1600. And this of course means that they are the earliest books in North America. And this book collection, the third largest in the world, is extremely important for the history of book and printing. And we're especially strong in 16th century imprints or works or studies by Mexican religious on indigenous languages. And these works are key for understanding indigenous languages even today. And one example on the screen here is that of a work by Alonso de Molina, a Franciscan who was very important in the study of indigenous languages in the 16th century. And you can see on the title page, a nice title page, nice woodcut here. It's clearly Franciscan. There's St. Francis receiving the stigmata. So let me close with some bibliographical aids that will help you investigate our holdings here. Since I've just talked about our early Mexican imprints, here is our guide to our Mexican imprints on indigenous languages. And probably the key source here is our guide to Hispanic manuscripts. You can see the URL here. It's part of our Huntington Digital Library. You can see the range of topics and also geographical areas that this guide to manuscripts covers. Very, very important source here. Last but not least, all of our finding aids as guides to our collections, including for our Hispanic collections, are found at the Online Archive of California. And this is an archival portal for archives and repositories throughout the state. So that's about it. I hope I've demystified at least somewhat our holdings here. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. There's my email. And now I turn things over to my distinguished colleague and very good friend, Peter Blodgett.
Well, thank you very much, Clay. And I'm delighted to be here and to have the opportunity to address so many researchers who have a real interest in the Huntington's resources. I am picking up to some degree upon where Clay stopped, although it's clearly going to be an opportunity to draw upon a variety of materials. Let's see. Here we go. I will follow up in particular from where Clay started by emphasizing the significance of our guide to manuscripts for the study of Iberian, Latin American, and Latino history in the Huntington Library. This was a product of our late colleague, Bill Frank, whom some of you in the audience may be familiar with. He drew upon an enormous number of resources for this item, and with the sterling assistance of our technical information services colleague, Wes Hardesty, you have a QR code. This is very new to me, so I'm delighted that we have the opportunity to display this for you. This is part of our Huntington Digital Library, which is the repository for materials that are made available to us, made available by us to scholars and to the general audience globally. And there are various resources that you may find of use. We've been endeavoring to strengthen this in the wake of the great pandemic to ensure that researchers have the opportunity to consult at least some materials remotely if necessary, although we're certainly hoping, as I know Dr. Molina will encourage you to do, that you will be coming back to us in person as well. I'm going to highlight a few of our collections that I think are particularly significant in several of the fields that Clay has identified for you. I will just reiterate what Clay has said, that across the board in topics such as economics, politics, labor and culture, national resources and extractive industries, our holdings for the study of Hispanic history are extremely deep and sometimes surprisingly so. I don't know if any of the names on the left-hand column are particularly familiar to any of you, but some of them, which On first blush, such as the papers of American mining and petroleum engineer Ralph Arnold, don't necessarily appear to have a specific connection. If you dig into them just very quickly beneath the surface, you will find that Ralph Arnold was the pioneer in the development of the gargantuan oil industry in Venezuela in the 20th century, as represented by so much of his material. He indulged in mining engineering activities, especially the evaluation of mining properties literally from one end of this hemisphere south to the other. And researchers will find not only reports on particular properties, but his business correspondence and his entrepreneurship. In the same way that Mary Hunter Austin, a familiar figure in the early 20th century, much less so today, her passion for the study of Spanish and indigenous folklore in the American Southwest led to her acquisition of an enormous array of materials regarding Spanish language poetry and certain types of vernacular theater, such as pastorales. And of course, anyone who is familiar with Dr. Castillo-Muñoz's work will recognize the Comichas colony, 28 boxes worth of material housed in the Thomas R. Bard papers, a collection which is, I think, got a tremendous amount to say about aspects of Mexican history in the course of the first half of the 20th century. The Huntington has been traditionally interested in the development of collections that engage in politics and in governance throughout the West. And a couple of the most significant are those of Albert Bacon Fall, Secretary of the Interior for Warren G. Harding. And before that, one of the first two senators from New Mexico, and William Rich, whose service as territorial secretary for the territory of New Mexico in the last quarter of the 19th century gave him a perfect opportunity to draw unto himself an enormous collection of original source material reaching well back into the 17th century and forward to the nearly the end of the 19th, just as our Southern Pacific de Mexico and Robert G. Cleland collection offer incredibly deep resources into the study of economic and political activities in Mexico at the turn of the 20th century. Indeed, Cleland was a member of the research team put together by the Doheny Foundation, which has just received significant attention in Julieta Majorana's Birth of the Mexican Problem, Oil in Mexico, U.S. Social Sciences and Transnational Labor, 1917 to 1920, in the autumn 2022 issue of the Western Historical Quarterly. Cleland's papers are filled with the source material upon which the final report was based. There is a tremendous amount, therefore, that can be learned for the 19th and 20th centuries. You'll see on the right a number of other collections and items that I put up here just as teasers, so that any of you interested in specific time periods could think about going to any one of the online resources that I mention here. First and foremost, of course, after you've looked at the guide to Iberian, Latin American, and Latino collections, would be the Huntington online catalog. This resource is the best single resource for the study of what we have in our collections. Also, as Clay mentioned, the online archive of California, an absolutely critical resource. Not merely, let me add, if you are interested in California history, because we do not use that for just finding aids for the history, for collections that deal with the history of California. This is for all kinds of collections from all of these institutions, UCLA, USC, all the other UC campuses, the Hoover Institution, the State Library, and on and on. Very important that you delve into that. And then for those of you who are, I hope, seriously now considering adding the Huntington to your research travels, our website has a specific section marked using the library, which will be an absolutely essential tool for getting you familiar with our procedures in preparation for a visit. Excuse me. And in terms of a visit to the Huntington, there are a number of us besides just Clay and myself. And I've put up emails, not only for myself, but for a couple of my essential colleagues besides Clay. Lindy Lettinen, our recently appointed curator of photography. Her colleague, Aaron Chase, the assistant curator of photography and of our marvelous architectural collections. Carla Nielsen, curator of literary collections, an area in which there is much, often not immediately recognized, of value to people interested in the cultural turn. And Dave Mahaley and Crystal Satram are exceptionally able colleagues for prints and ephemera, who, along with Lindy and Aaron, should be very much kept in mind as crucial resources for the study of the visual world. The Huntington has even further colleagues than that, but I ran out of space on my slide. So you'll have to do a little more digging with the website. But at this moment, I'm going to try to put the brakes on, come to a halt, so that Veronica Castillo-Muñoz has the opportunity to inform you about the Huntington as seen through the user's point of view. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Hi, everyone. I want to talk about my experience conducting research at the Huntington Library. And what most surprised me about the collections was finding important information about, the day-to-day operations of, for instance, when I was working on my first project, the other California, the day-to-day operations of haciendas, letters from workers, and also very detailed company minutes about the families who lived in the haciendas, who were hired as seasonal workers, wages. That information was very critical, for me to write about the lives, experiences of workers in haciendas. And I used the Thomas Bard collection, as Peter mentioned, 26 boxes, very extensive information and very important information about haciendas in Nayarit, and the Thomas Bard collection, Kimish's Colony Addendum. For those also interested in, for instance, Ventura, I also found information about the connections between Ventura and Nayarit, which I found it incredibly interesting. And large companies, for instance, if you're working on northern Mexico, right, the U.S.-Mexico border, like Sonora, Baja California, Chihuahua, you will find important information in the Thomas E. Given collection, not just about politics, U.S.-Mexico relations, but also about how the United States was, the perceptions, or how they were viewing the Mexican Revolution at the turn of the 20th century. Very interesting. Next slide, please. Currently, I'm working on my second project, which is women of the Mexican Revolution. And basically, as I was working on my first project, I found some photographs of refugee camps and also accounts about women and families being detained at the U.S.-Mexico border. And this is thanks to these collections, the Mexican Border War postcard collection. They has photographs between 1910 and 1919 of women, families, and it's all about the U.S.-Mexico border. The Huntington also was just informed that it just obtained another collection of photographs, which is the album of photographic postcards of Mexican border wars. So, these are very important collections that will be very helpful to your research if you are doing research about, about Mexico, the United States, and the U.S.-Mexico border. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
After all this time, we are happy to send the materials in an email afterward, and maybe at the end, Wes, well, yeah, we'll do that because we had the QR code for Peter's materials, but I know that Clay also has materials. So we will compile them into a PDF and email them to all the participants today. Then also, would you speak about the digital library collections and any future projects that will be made available there? Maybe that's one way to also talk about how the Huntington's always growing. So when people say, oh, I'm not sure if they have something for me. I was there 20 years ago. Perhaps the curators could speak to that a little bit.
Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Clay.
One of our main jobs is to develop our collections and to build to our research strengths and also to expand and to meet scholars' needs. That's why we purchased the photographic album for Dr. Veronica Castillo-Muñoz. We pay attention to what readers are looking for here or need to research. So stay in touch with us and let us know what you're interested in. In terms of how we're growing, I should mention that digitizing materials is proceeding full steam ahead here, as Peter mentioned. It became particularly important during the pandemic, and I'm happy to announce that the Mexican Inquisition records are being digitized, and they'll be available next spring, and this will be a major accomplishment. It will be one of the largest digitized collections of Mexican Inquisition records or Inquisition records anywhere.
We're also in the process of developing an internal program of digitization in which at, I think, 6-month or yearly intervals, we'll be selecting through an internal process a variety of collections to be added to the digital library. One of them that will be coming up fairly soon will be the Pilot family collection. It's a small, but I think very intriguing collection of letters from a couple of members of a Chilean family who came to California for the gold rush. And this is comparatively unusual because, of course, although it was a representative population of note, strictly in numbers, there were not that many. And so to have a collection of correspondence, small as it may be, will be of particular, I think, significance as people dig further into the varieties of communities represented in that period.
Can you, Peter or Clay, can you talk a little bit about the virtual visits that started during the pandemic?
Our Reader Services Department created the virtual reading room, which has allowed using document cameras, and members of the Reader Services Department has allowed researchers working remotely to identify specific items that they can then see people paging through for them. And it's an opportunity for them to identify potentially materials they might want to have copied, or at least to determine whether a particular document or a particular collection is going to be of enduring value for their research. And it's proven tremendously popular. And while it's one of those things like, who was the first person to put peanut butter and fluff on the same sandwich, you can never really determine. I'd like to think that we were actually kind of a pioneer in it. So it's something that we hope will not have to be routinely used because of pandemics, but could help people who haven't had the opportunity to travel because of lack of funds or personal circumstances.
Yeah, you could excuse me, Natalia, you could schedule this service for 1 hour and you can literally look through archival collections folder by folder, box by box. It's very thorough and extensive.
And it's something, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, it's something that our Reader Services Department is delighted that we were able to do.
So as Clay said, you want to make an appointment. And if you come to the Huntington, look at the procedures for coming ahead of time, because to look at materials, you need to register for a library card, what we call a reader card. And so just like anywhere else, any other archive, you want to plan ahead. What we've noticed too with the virtual appointments, and I've used them too, is that they were helpful for the pandemic when you couldn't come in. But as Clay said, if you're traveling or you're just preparing an application for funding here, one of the questions is, are there particular funding opportunities at the Huntington connected to some of these collections? Thank you for asking, anonymous attendee. That's exactly why we're doing, one of the reasons we're doing this webinar. We'll put up the link afterward. We could send it to you in the email, but if you Google basically Huntington Library fellowship applications, it'll come up. We have both short-term fellowships, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. We have the long-term fellows with which Dr. Verónica Castillo-Muñoz was a fellow at. And that deadline is coming up on, I believe it's November 15th, right there. And that's why you really want to know the collections ahead of time, because you're making a case, a rationale for why you need the fellowship, that you're going to do research here. We're a collections-based institution, so our fellowships are linked to the collections. So your application won't be as successful if you can't talk about the applications, about the collections. So you want to do that. And sometimes you might think, do they have a little bit or a lot of it? And that, you can look through the finding aid, you can make an appointment with one of our curators, library services, and you might just need to look through a box and say, oh, there's a ton for me to do. I'll do an application, or actually I can ask for a request for them to scan that and send it to me, and then I can go to another archive where my time would best be served. Veronica, there's a question for you. I hope, Dr. Castillo-Muñoz, have you discovered more findings about women who fled the Mexican Revolution in LA during this time?
Oh, thank you for your question. Yes, I have. And I've been compiling, started at the Huntington. This second project started at the Huntington. And then I went to El Paso. I've been going through different places. El Paso, I just came back from Mexico. I spent about a month and a half in Mexico doing research and finding letters. Some women that, work as nurses. Also, what is in the botiquín, right? Like what was in the medicine cabinet? I always wondered when I started working on a chapter about that. And I found a list of the medicine cabinet, like what did they have? And so, little by little, I've been finding pieces of information here and there, and I'm writing the book. And I'm very excited, right, that I've been finding little pieces of information to write about the everyday life experiences of Mexican women, and also, right, like their experiences living is being detained as refugees at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Maybe this next question, these next couple questions, I'll just ask in general to the curators. So if I want to research what we have, where, I know you mentioned it, but can you tell us again, do I go to the Huntington Digital Library Catalog? Where can I put in my keywords? We have people asking about things like the pastorelas, people asking about materials related to the Caribbean. So where's the best place to start?
The Huntington online catalog, just the plain old vanilla online catalog. And you can use keyword searching. You can use author searching if you're looking to see what we might have for a particular writer, or if you know of a specific subject. For example, if you were interested in slave revolts, or interested in sugar, or interested in petroleum, you can use those. Then you can work your way outward. The Huntington Digital Library is really for looking for materials that basically we have, and you'd like to see if perhaps they are there electronically, or if you are looking in a specific area that you want to pursue. And the online archive of California, often you don't even have to go there separately. If you go to the and I know I'm throwing a lot of online this and online that, bear with me. If you go to our online catalog and you look up, for example, the Pilot family, you will often see that there is a link that says View Finding Aid online. Click on that and it takes you directly to the online archive of California. And then you can actually work outward through it if you want to see what we have, or you even want to do something broader and see who might have more material about, if there were other institutions with material about the Lozano family, or about the Mexican Revolution, or about the Cristero movement. So that I would always start with the Huntington online catalog. You can either search that directly, or I think on the Using the Library page, I think there's a link there, and start your searching.
I Googled Huntington online catalog, and it's just catalog.huntington.org. I put it in the chat right now. And then while Clay's answering, I will also do that for the Huntington Digital Collection. So we talked about 3: Huntington online category, Huntington Digital Collection, and then the online archive of California. All 3 of these are invaluable resources. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Also, I'd note that you can search our online catalog by format: rare books, photographs, or manuscripts, which is very, very useful tool in doing your research here.
Is that you sharing your screen, Clay?
No, that's not me. Go into advanced search.
Probably Wes. Wes thinks of everything. Thank you, Wes Hardesty, for helping us today.
Yep. If you go to, modify search, then on the second box, you can do format, or you can do material type, which is right below that, or you can do language, which is right below that, or you can even do illustrations, or you can do a targeted search for a time period. So it's a powerful tool. It can seem very intimidating, because if you pull up, say you wanted to check Mexico, which please don't, you might have a heart attack. You would come up with thousands and thousands of, thank you, Wes. Yes, let's hit submit and see what we get. See if you get 11,964 results. So you don't want to go through those item by item. That's where modify search is an absolutely critical tool, just as Clay was saying. It is, yes, perfect. Wes, you are a god. This is, and see, we have 849. We have the SP de Mexico. We have, French interests in Mexico, a master's thesis from 1946, a travel album from 1940. By God, I think that's one I bought. So, the flexibility is really nice. Now, I started here at the Huntington a million years ago on a manual typewriter producing paper cards that we put in a card catalog. And I thought that was a real whiz-bang tool, but the online catalog, that will take you to places that, you couldn't imagine you would find. And do be generous in your search terms, because there's a lot of interconnectivity. As Clay was speaking of the Cristero movement, it reminded me that I had just seen references to the Cristero movement in the Southern Pacific de Mexico, where there's correspondence about the destruction of SP facilities and equipment. And I get the impression that sort of a little tug of war between the SP, the parent company, and the Mexican Republic about, well, who's responsible for this, and who's gonna pay us for this, and all that fun stuff. So it's really valuable to cast your net as widely as possible.
Okay, we're going to do a speed round now, because otherwise we won't get to all the questions. So yes, no, and where should I start my search? As you can see, audience, these are people with a capacious knowledge. So we're at least going to give people the first foothold in. I research materials related to the Caribbean. Biracial families that left Florida, lived across different parts of the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, 1840 to 1870s. Should they start? Yes, no? Should they think? Are you thinking they should look at the Huntington? And if so, where? Huntington Library Catalog?
Huntington Library Catalog, and possibly some of our maritime materials.
Maritime is big at the Huntington. And I used to always think of maritime as kind of British. And we have people coming here for maritime all the time, and they're checking the Caribbean. The other thing is look at Caribbean, Veracruz, Cartagena, Spain. You see people coming and they're researching in Spain at their national archives, and they come here, then they go to another library. Like the people they're following, they follow the archives.
Yeah, we have extensive holdings in Spanish exploration of the Pacific as well.
Okay. Try to contain yourselves to yes, no, and where to start, because well, for this next one, because this next one, you're just gonna, I know we have this mission style architecture. That's what I said.
Emphatic yes. Emphatic yes.
Emphatic yes, Todd. Yes.
Aaron Chase.
Aaron Chase, that's your curator. So you can also look up our curators. We need to put that in the resources as well, please, our curators. Also, when we have those long-term fellowships that I mentioned, you can go to the webpage, Long-Term Fellows, Huntington Library, and see past awardees. See who got those fellowships, long-term and short-term, because you'll see a lot of projects that we've already funded. And so, for example, mission style architecture, we have like 2-3 people in residence this year for our long-term fellows that are already doing this kind of work. Irrigation systems. So irrigation systems, environmental history, water management.
Emphatic yes.
Emphatic yes.
Huntington Digital Library, section called Collection Guides. Look for the guide to water, collections relating to the history of water in North America.
Dominguez Watson family and/or Shell Oil, land speculation and discovery of oil in South Bay of LA. Natural resources, extractive industries.
Certainly possible. Ralph Arnold collection to start, possibly Clarence Van Gundy to follow.
Is this the best webinar ever or what? Can you share a bit more about the Huntington USC Institute of California in the West? Do you collaborate with other universities in California? Wes, would you be kind enough to put up California in the West, ICW, Huntington USC? This is the center that Bill Deverell, noted Western historian, president of the Western Historical Association, Western History Association, that he started with USC. And it's really an institute that's trying to get at many of the topics that you all have already mentioned and make them more public facing, have collaborations. We have the LA History Group that meets here. We have an Asian American History Group. They have podcasts, they have different things. So that's a collaboration between the Huntington and USC, but they have a lot, yes, Huntington Dornsife, yes. That's a collaboration that there's a lot of working groups under it. And so you'll see they have a speaker series. Oh, can we go to their calendar? They have wonderful speakers right here, upcoming events. Oh, I was trying to do a plug for me. I have an upcoming event coming through there that I'm not seeing. And I think mine is October 17th with Seb Moses, Pouring with Heart. He has a new book on, the service industry. That's so odd that it's not on there. That's okay. But you see, they have a lot of different collaborations. We can go back to their main page, Wes, and that way I can talk about their wonderful programs. You see they have different podcasts. They did a wonderful series on Chinatown with one of our other curators here, Li Wei, who they're talking about kind of the idea of Chinatown and the creation of Chinatown. You see that they have different research groups. And some of those research groups, we have both some of our virtual programming. They have these different series. So it's a capacious institute. So if you're interested in California and the West, you definitely want to look at their website. They've had different working groups, people. Oh, there it is. Sorry, Wes, can you scroll up? Can we click on the little blue one? Just passed by us. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Yes, if we could just click on there's their Instagram. That's interesting. And scroll down a little bit.
Snap widget.
Yeah, we don't even know what this is. Never mind. That's fine. But anyway, we have that. We also have an institute with USC with Peter Mancall called the Early Modern Studies Institute. And to your point of collaborating with other universities, different people lead those groups, including people at UC Riverside. They bring in different conferences. So yes, a lot of collaboration. So not just the collections around the American West and borderlands related to the research you can do here, but the scholars you can talk to, the conferences you can pitch, the webinars you can join, the podcasts you can listen to. It just keeps growing and growing here at the Huntington. Are there unprocessed collections that can still be made available to researchers via appointment or specific arrangements with archivists?
We have no backlog here at the Huntington. That was a joke.
That's a little curator humor for you all.
Yeah. It's an inside joke, but anyway, pardon me. But it's a case by case. It's case by case.
We're cracking ourselves up here.
Qualified, yes.
Whiz bang, yes, we are like trying to knock these out. Okay, I'm going to do another, let's see, speed round. Materials related specifically to Mexican repatriation campaigns in LA in the 1930s.
Yes.
Start with Huntington catalog.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Gloria Molina papers. That's a good place.
Possibly
Gloria
John
Molina
Anson
papers has
Ford.
things on repatriation?
Yeah, for some reason she had records, photocopies of LA County records in her office. I think it's
Gloria
box.
Molina will be looking at Gloria Molina's papers. I didn't even know that. See, this is what I'm saying. You don't know what you don't know. Because you
It's
think
box
Gloria
one.
Molina's recent, but it's her papers. So you're getting everything she collected, which is why you have to always check back with archives. Clay, that is gold. Thank you.
Box one.
remigration. I haven't heard that term. Remigration of Black Americans to the American South. Oh, so migrating here and then maybe returning. Remigration of Black Americans and the American South in the late 20th century. That one's a tougher one.
That's much tougher.
Yeah, maybe it might have been an issue that one of the county supervisors in the late 20th century, either Ken Hahn or Ed Edelman, and especially Kenny Hahn, because of course his district incorporated what was then South Central LA.
Okay. Mario Perez, is it best to search in English or Spanish?
Depends upon your time period. The older works are listed in Spanish, that is printed works. So if you're interested in 17th, 18th century works, typically the titling is in Spanish. The basic architecture is all in English.
Okay. David Stein, I'm researching gold mining, extraction, and the history of monetary policy. I know you have holdings related to gold mining in the US, but do you have materials related to gold mining in South Africa or Australia?
Yes, not much, but a little. We just acquired a small group of letters from an mining engineer in early 20th century South Africa.
Audience, can we just agree that you will be surprised if you come here? I mean, you just like this, whatever you think we have, know that our collections are always growing. Sometimes they're small collections, sometimes it's letters, sometimes it's collections within a collection, like for the Gloria Molina papers. Romeo Guzman also had that question. And thank you, Romeo, for noticing my painting. I brought it for you all. I didn't have it up before, but I wanted to have something in the background. So yes, Romeo says, thank you. This is a good question from here. Now we have the question coming from a different, and we're going to stay on a few more minutes just to try to get through some of these. Karen Hickson has a good question, which is, look, she knows we have the Octavia Butler collection, but the material is so extensive. How do you select materials for a virtual visit when you know that the collection is extensive?
Go to the guide to the collection and look through the box and folder list, which will provide a list of the contents in the various boxes in the Butler collection, and try to zero in on something.
And that isn't always as fully possible, depending upon the collection and how it was processed. Some are not processed in quite the same degree of depth, but always start, as Clay says, with the finding aid. Squeeze as much juice as you can out of it, and then you at least have a starting point.
One of the things I like to do is, look at those people who've written your book. Here we have this beautiful book by Linnell George, A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Earth and a Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia Butler. And she's used the Huntington collections, right? So look up those secondary sources and see what people have used. Frank Barajas, this is one of our last, almost our last speed round, maybe our last speed round question, which is Chicano movement in Southern California, specifically Ventura County. Hi, Frank. Nice to see you.
Not real hopeful.
I'm sorry, Clay, can you answer that again?
Not real hopeful.
Okay, but anything related to Chicano movement?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Starting with collection.
Gloria Molina papers. I would start with the Gloria Molina papers.
Wonderful. This is I'm going to ask Kimberly's question, but kind of if we could use it as a window into maybe how we pick collections. Thank you for an amazing webinar. Would you all have policies or archives related to Echo Park and MacArthur Park and policing of youth? And so these are contemporary. So also maybe talk about kind of collecting in contemporary collections, like maybe the acquiring of Gloria Molina's papers, how we make these decisions?
Okay, well, Gloria Molina came to us and we worked out an agreement by her. I mean, it's kind of in a nutshell, and we acquired her papers. It's a sometimes acquisition of materials with donors. It's sometimes the institution contacts people, and sometimes people contact the institution.
Okay.
And certainly there would be ample material in this, possibly for decades worth, because I have to think there'd be at least a little as far back as the John Ensign Ford papers, who's a supervisor in the 1930s and 40s, Kenny Hahn, Ed Edelman, Gloria Molina. We have this arc ranging across the historical landscape for Southern California that's really quite staggering.
I would also add the Fletcher Bowron papers too. I think could be useful.
Yep, L.A. Mayor Bowron.
And this is what I think is interesting about the Huntington is I use those Bowron papers since my dissertation. I use them for almost every project, but it keeps growing, right? The collections keep growing. So I wouldn't have thought to look at the Gloria Molina papers for the kinds of things that I like repatriation. I went to the LA County for that, but the LA County is not even an archive. And so the fact that, right, like not official, not a public like, right? And so the fact that you can use that collection, the Gloria Molina collection to use something, to access something that you can't really even in an archive, that's pretty amazing. I think we are almost done. We, anonymous attendee, do collaborate with other universities. I think we've answered that one. And who's my painting? I will put that in the chat. Okay, Molina's papers, wonderful. We're so happy that you're all here today. I want to close with a couple things. So Wes, if you could please put up the conference slide. So one, we have other events coming up centering race and disability in the history of eugenics, imagining Shakespeare in 2050, and rounding out, those are two that we have up, but we're always putting up new conferences. We have almost one a month. And so we hope you'll join us for one of these. The next one is October 14th and 15th. Dr. Alexandra Stern, who is the new Dean of Humanities at UCLA, Dr. Natalia Molina, who've both written on eugenics, will be here. So, and I'll be hosting, so please come say hi. Then we also want to put up the page. Oh, we already did for the long-term, and remember, short-term fellowships. And we will be sending you a follow-up email with these materials because we want to see you. We want you to get the information that you need. And so I'll just close by thanking Drs. Stalls, Blodgett, and Castillo-Muñoz, thanking Wes Hardestry, AV, who has walked me through all of this. And here in our research staff, Natalie Serrano, who sent about 1 million emails to make this all happen. So thank you all so much for being here today. And we will have this, Wes will figure out some way to make this presentation live on the interweb for us, should you ever need to refer to it. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.